Last week, we heard about a woman named Mary who poured expensive perfume on Jesus' feet to help prepare him for his death. Mary loved Jesus so much that she worshipped him in this way in front of everyone who was around. Today, we're going to hear how Jesus and his disciples celebrated Passover before his trial and his death on the cross. Do you remember what the Passover is? Not too many weeks ago, we had a meal in the gym where we talked about the different elements of the Passover. As a reminder, here's how it started. Way back in the big God story, God's people, the Israelites, lived as slaves in Egypt until God raised up a leader named Moses to help lead God's people out of Egypt and into the Promised Land. God sent many plagues on Egypt so Pharaoh would let the Israelites go. Remember some of those plagues? There were locusts and flies. But the last plague that God sent was a very sad one. It was a plague to take the lives of all the firstborn sons of Egypt. But God wanted to save anyone who believed in him, especially his people, from this plague. So he gave them some very special instructions. He told them to take the blood of a perfect lamb and to paint it on the doorpost of their homes. When the plague came, the homes with the lamb's blood on them would be passed over, sparing the lives of the people who lived inside. Through this Passover, God revealed to his people that he is the deliverer, the one who saves them. He wanted his people to know him and to trust him. God didn't want his people to forget how important this was, so he told them every year to celebrate it as a reminder of how they had been delivered. So every year, year after year, they ate the same Passover meal. Even though they didn't know it at the time, the Passover meal pointed to a time in the future when God would reveal himself as the deliverer and as the Passover lamb through his Son, Jesus. So before Jesus' trial and death on the cross, Jesus and his disciples shared a special Passover meal. Jesus wanted to reveal more of who he was to his disciples by explaining what his death would mean. As they ate, Jesus began to explain that this Passover meal would take on a new meaning. He started by using the different items they were eating. The Passover meal included bitter herbs. The bitter herbs reminded God's people of the bitterness of slavery that they had suffered in Egypt. The meal also included unleavened bread. The unleavened bread reminded the people of how quickly they had left Egypt. And the Passover meal included a perfect lamb. When they were about to eat the flat bread, Jesus said, "Take and eat. This is my body." Wow, what an interesting thing for Jesus to say. Why would he say something like that? Jesus handed the disciples the bread and told them that the bread represented his own body, his body that would soon die. Jesus was telling them to remember him whenever they ate the bread. Then Jesus took the cup, gave it to his disciples, and said, "Drink from it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many, for the forgiveness of sins." A covenant is a lot like a promise. See, the cup's contents represented the blood that Jesus would shed on the cross. And it's through Jesus' blood that people are saved. Jesus was telling his disciples that they could experience this promise of true forgiveness through his blood, and that they were to remember that whenever they drank from the cup. Jesus changed the focus of the Passover from Israel's deliverance from slavery to a new focus, a deliverance from sin. The disciples might have thought that they were celebrating the Israelites' deliverance, but they were really celebrating everyone's future deliverance from sin through the death and resurrection of Jesus. Jesus is the Passover lamb. As the Lamb of God, Jesus' blood would be shed to bring freedom. Not freedom from slavery to a nation, but from slavery to sin. Jesus would soon be the once and for all sacrifice, because he was the perfect lamb. This is all really amazing because it still applies to us today. Maybe you've eaten the meal that Jesus ate with his disciples, the bread that represents his body and the cup that represents his blood. And if you have, you've probably heard someone read the instructions from the Bible to eat and drink this meal in remembrance of Jesus. You see, we still eat this Passover meal, bread and wine or juice, to remind us of Jesus' body being broken and his blood being spilled for us on the cross. When Jesus came to earth and died on the cross, shedding his blood for us, he freed us and delivered us from being slaves to sin. He is the deliverer. He's the rescuer that we needed. Because of what Jesus did for us on the cross, he revealed himself to be the rescuer, the deliverer, who has the power to free us from our slavery and captivity to sin. You might not think that you're captive to sin, but try for a whole day on your own not to do anything wrong, and you'll see that we all mess up. We all make mistakes. We all sin. Jesus came and died for us because he loves us, and he chose to do this so that we would be free from sin and free to be with him.